Good evening. This is the Wolfeboro Planning Board meeting for Tuesday, March 18th. My name is Doug Breskin. I'm the chairperson of the Planning Board. To my left, we have Vaughn Dugan, Peter Goodwin, Roger Murray. To my right, Steve Webster is the vice chair. Shanna Saunders is our interim planner. Nancy Wiley is a new member, newly elected this month, and Julie Jacobs as an alternate. Julie, we don't have a representative for the Board of Selectmen. Will you sit in their place?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No? Can't do that? All right. So now we've had our introductions. Nancy, thank you for stepping up and being a member of the board.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let us know if you feel overwhelmed. Yes, but we need to speak into the microphones. Thank you.
Okay.
The first item on the agenda is for the work session is a review of the shoreland permit application review. Shanna, do you want to introduce that?
Yes, absolutely. I can do that, Mr. Chairman. So what you have in your packet that went out earlier is a copy of the shoreland ordinance, the new one that was approved at town meeting 3/12/24. It'll say at the top. You also have in front of you that was handed out tonight an application that was filled out with a site plan. The site plan itself, the plan is not as important, but it'll help you understand the application. But what I'd like to do is go through that ordinance and the application with you, kind of point by point, so that we can see kind of what some of the issues are at hand. And then what I'm looking for from you tonight is help with the interpretation. What I am seeing kind of as a new set of eyes interpreting and using this application as permits come in is that the wording of the ordinance and the wording in the applications do not match. And so we either need to change the ordinance or we need to redraft the application. So what I'm going to do is go through point by point tonight exactly how they don't line up. And then the feedback I need from you is which direction to go in, which are we going to amend, the application of the ordinance. And so with the ordinance, I'm hoping everyone has that in front of them. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to do is actually start at the very end of the ordinance, because this is one of the more important pieces. On page 6 of that ordinance, section D, is a section called lot redevelopment. And that lot redevelopment section has two sections. The first one is that any property owner who wishes to redevelop the property shall submit, put together by a professional engineer, the following A through D. And then the second, number 2, is that more nearly conforming is basically defined. So that section has a number of submittal requirements and the definition of more nearly conforming, but no action steps. Nothing related to how that lot redevelopment should be acted upon in the ordinance or the application. We'll now start at the beginning of the ordinance and go through it, but please note as we go through the rest of this ordinance, the word lot redevelopment, the term lot redevelopment, or the word redevelopment is never used again throughout the rest of the ordinance. So there is no reference to that or no further action items to that portion of the ordinance. And we'll come back to that at the end as we go through it. So starting on page 1, section 62, 63, 64, dimensional requirements, getting into permitted uses on page 5, that's page 2, which is 65, 175, 65. All good, right? That's really a statement of fact of dimensional requirements, which are setbacks and height, and then uses. So what uses are allowed in the shorefront residential district? Black and white, very clear, no issue there. Then we get into page 3, section 175-67. And I'll let you know right up front, even though we'll go through this section by section, that there are 3 sections to this portion of the ordinance. One that deals with the 250 feet, which is the section A, one that deals with 150 feet, which is section B, and one that deals with the 50 feet, which is section C. And we'll go through each one of those. So in section A, it deals with the 250 feet. And here in Wolfeboro, in that 250-foot area, really the criteria that we're looking at is the impervious lot coverage. And the way that the ordinance is broken down, there's kind of three criteria for the, or sections for that. The first one is the 30%. So above 30%, no development can happen. So you can have no more than 30% impervious coverage. That's an A. In B, if you have between 15 and 20, so kind of a lesser category, these are a little bit out of order, you have to put in some stormwater control measures, and there's some information, which leaves the gap of between 20 and 30, which is section C. So we're not really going chronological here, you can see, which is fine, but so then there's that more than 20 but not 30, you need to have a professional engineer with a stormwater plan, basically. So a stormwater management plan prepared by a professional engineer. Additionally, in that area, so any area where you have, or any plan that has between 20 and 30% coverage, you need also then to meet the grid segments with the 25-point tree score. And that's important to note here. We're going to talk a little bit more about that because there's more details regarding that later on. Then the rest of it kind of talks about if you have no change. So if you have no change in impervious area, you don't have to do anything. When you do put stormwater, and that's in D, in E, if you do put stormwater control measures in, they need to be verified. You need to manage all new stormwater, and you need to do maintenance on that stormwater, which is G. And then getting into the rest of A, it talks about other restrictions, new lots, and septic system setbacks, which are fairly black and white. So then we get into the natural woodlands buffer standards. Now, and don't forget that area, that portion of the ordinance for impervious coverage relates to all 250 feet of shoreland area. This next section only relates to the area within 150 feet from the reference line. And as you read further, it's really, for some of it, between the 50-foot section from the reference line, which is the edge of water, and the 150. So it's kind of that middle segment of the lot. And for that, there are two segments of this that are looked at. Lots that are half an acre or more. And in lots that are half an acre or more, in section B1, at least 50% of the area of that middle section of the lot, exclusive of impervious surfaces, so you take out the impervious surfaces, must be maintained in an unaltered state. An unaltered state is defined at the end of the ordinance, and it basically means non-landscape vegetation. So it's the very last paragraph of the entire ordinance, and it's naturalized vegetation. So 50% exclusive of impervious surfaces. Section 2 is for lots that are less than half an acre. In less than half an acre, it's not exclusive of impervious surfaces. That phrase is not in that section. And you need to have at least 25% of the area needs to remain in an unaltered state. Number 3 is that for lots that do not comply with either the 50% exclusive of impervious area or the 25% gross area, you must satisfy those two amounts by using the renewal standards below. So you must bring your section, that middle section of the lot, up to either that 50% or that exclusive of impervious area or the 25%. And not only does it say that there are renewal standards, but then you can see underneath A through F are what those renewal standards are, and it talks about how much vegetation has to go into that unaltered area. If we turn now to the application, page one of the application is really contact information, right? Page 2 of the application speaks to that impervious area within the 250 feet of the reference line. So that is all of section A, that impervious area. And it's really square footage of items within that shoreland area. And we can talk, if we want to get into detail about what items those are, we can get into that. There is a definition of impervious area, there's a definition of structure in the ordinance, but we can get into that. But that page is fine of the application. If we move on to page 3, and we are going to get technical here, and I apologize, so definitely stop me if you have questions. On page 3, we are now working on calculating that natural woodlands buffer area in section B of the ordinance. So that's the area within 150 feet and 50 feet, as we learn when we read further in section B. And so line F, and the lines are numbered on the right-hand side of the application. Line F has you calculate that. And that is currently existing in F, and then your total area in G, which helps you determine percentage. And then you can see in H, you are determining whether or not you are half an acre, so whether you're the 25%, or you are greater than half an acre, which is the 50%. So then you do your math. So if you are a small lot, right? So in bold, if H, which is your total area in that middle section, is less than or equal to half an acre, then you calculate the amount of natural woodlands buffer that you need, which is line I. Right, so it's 0.25, 25% times your total area, and that'll give you your 25%. Then if you go down to the next line, it says large lots. If H is greater than half an acre, 21,000, then 50% of the vegetation, exclusive of the impervious area, must remain in an altered state. And so in J, you put your post-construction area between 50 and 150. And you figure out your minimum area required to remain in an unaltered state, which is K, which is the 50%, right? Because you're on a large lot times J. Then it says to place the smaller of either what's existing or what's required onto line L. So rather than applying the renewal standards, which say you are subject to bring your lot up to the 25 or the 50%, this line L on the application, says you can take your existing conditions and carry that down to L, and that is the only percentage you're subject to.
Do not decrease.
What, I'm sorry?
It's a do not decrease sort of a clause. You can't decrease your unaltered.
Could you bring your mic closer?
Oh, sorry. We're so close. It's sort of a do not decrease from the original. You can't have any less.
It could be seen that way, yep,
Yeah.
yep. But it doesn't follow the ordinance. There is no do not decrease in the ordinance. In fact, the ordinance says if you can't decrease. And in fact, if you don't meet those 50 or 25, you need to renew her 3A through J, or F, A through F. You have to increase. And that's where the application stops. There is no further information on this application required from the applicant about how they're going to meet section B3, the renewal standards, which again, B3, A through J. So somebody put a lot of thought into how these renewal standards were going to work. And the application doesn't speak to that at all. And so,
I just have one question.
Yes.
I'm seeing there's a date at the bottom of the page here of 2012 from the permit. Mm-hmm. Has this ever been updated?
I don't think so.
Thanks.
So the argument could be made that when the ordinance was updated, that the application should have been updated.
Yeah, that was last year, and we've kind of had a staff shuffle.
Yes.
And so, so we can continue going on with the ordinance real quick. So then on page 5 of the ordinance, section C, halfway down the page, section C, that are the requirements for the 50-foot setback. So now we're very tight to the water. We're very strict. You can see right away all primary structures must be set back, so nothing within, no primary structures within that area. And then this is the section that speaks to that grid segment area that is required. This is what is required in that grid segment area. And then don't forget that grid segment area was referred to back on page 3. So for any project that will result in more than 20% impervious coverage, that 25-point tree score grid segment area must be met, as well as this section in the 50-foot setback. I should say the details that are laid out in the 50-foot setback area, which makes you think this is only applicable to impacts in the 50-foot setback area, is clearly called out on any plan that brings the impervious surface up to 20% or greater. And then as we get through the ordinance, as we move on to page 6 and we get through section C, we move on to lot redevelopment, which is D, which is what we covered first. And as you'll remember, there is no reference to lot redevelopment in any of those 3 sections, in the 250, the 150, or the 50, about what to do if your lot is a redevelopment lot. And so you get to this section of the ordinance, and in a reviewer who has no experience with this, the way that I read this was that if you're going to do a lot redevelopment, you have to provide above and beyond any other person these materials, which to me did not make sense, because I think the intent was to allow a little bit more leniency perhaps with lot redevelopment. But that's the way the ordinance reads, is that if you're redeveloping instead of building a brand new house, you have to provide footprint, impervious areas, locations, profiles of all structures, ridgeline heights and scales and dimensions, plus a narrative letter explaining how you're more nearly non-conforming, which again seemed counterintuitive to me. So that is the perspective of a newbie coming to town, reading the actual law and trying to apply it to the ordinance, to the application and to the permits that are coming in. And so again, what I need from you guys, and we certainly don't need to decide tonight and maybe need to think about it, and I'm happy to come back, is that really the language that you intended to adopt in this ordinance? Do we want to tweak this a little bit differently? Or are you comfortable with this language and how this reads? And do we really just need to rewrite the permit to include some of the areas that are missing and to kind of come parallel with the wording of the ordinance?
Yeah, I would suggest that at minimum, we need to redo the permit application, given that it's 13 years old.
Yep.
At minimum. Whether we change the ordinance or not, and I'm sure that would require a vote at the next town election, at minimum, we need to update the permit application.
Well, I think there's an operative word under lot redevelopment, and that is pre-existing non-conforming primary structure. And where you do have such a structure, then I think Section D applies. I think on the application you sent to us, as I would view that, they don't have to do a stormwater management plan, but they have to meet everything else because it's not a non-conforming structure. I think the D was intended so where you do have one of these properties where there is a non-conforming structure, you can develop it, and the language in D may not be the most precise, but I think the intent is to allow that to proceed so that you're not hamstringing somebody, and in fact, the requirements would be less stringent than if it was not a redevelopment of a non-conforming existing structure.
So I think the question then is, in the lot development situation, what portions of 17567 A, B, and C apply only to lot redevelopment, and what portions of each one of those sections apply to brand new development?
I think D applies to lot redevelopment where there's a pre-existing non-conforming structure. And I did look at two of the applications that Randy submitted, and that seemed to be in keeping with how Matt Sullivan and Rob Hausman treated them, but I'm not sure about entirely clear on the past history.
So I recall arguing, and I gave everybody a copy a while ago of all of our meeting notes when we were developing the changes to the shoreland application, that we did, when you were redeveloping a lot, you wanted it to be better, at a minimum the same, and also better. And I don't think the argument was only if you have a building within the setbacks. And I think, Shanna, that's the way you just interpreted it, that it actually meant two things. One thing for buildings within the setback, and another thing for pre-existing structures. I don't know that I'm looking at it two different ways. It does say pre-existing non-conforming primary structure, so I think the intent there is that it is within the setbacks. I think my issue with lot redevelopment is, again, it's just a list of submittal requirements. There's nothing in here that tells anyone how to apply the, if I can call it, shoreline dimensional requirements. So the impervious coverage, the natural woodlands buffer, or the 50-foot grid. I have no idea how to apply those three sections to lot redevelopment. You just have to show that it's in greater conformity with the standards. You could pick and choose. You could say, okay, I'm adding 3 trees in grid section 4.
So
and
you're basically
I'm gonna
exempt. You're exempt from everything. You just have to
show that you're doing better.
better.
You're improving it.
Yep, okay.
That was what I argued back in the meeting notes. One of the things, though, that we did change when we went through this was the criteria for a shoreland water management plan by a professional engineer. That was something we definitely changed, so that if you weren't over 20%, you did not have to hire an engineer to do it. You could just provide a structure, a waterfront, a water filtration,
A BMP,
trench,
yep.
or any one of the things on the list.
Yep, and that is very clear, right? So in AC, for a project that will result in 20% impervious, more than 20% impervious coverage, a stormwater management plan prepared by a professional engineer must be implemented.
Right.
So that is very clear. Yep.
Yeah.
So I think what is unclear in the ordinance is that if you are doing a lot redevelopment and you provide that narrative letter explaining how the project is more nearly conforming, then you are basically exempt from A, B, and C.
I don't think you're exempt from it because it refers to it. It says in greater conformity with the standards of this section. You just have to argue that this is how we're doing it. This makes sense on this property. We're going to add these trees. We're going to add this infiltration trench. We're going to make it better in these methods.
But you don't need to meet the minimum requirements. Okay.
It just has to be better.
Yep. Yep.
So should there be a section in the application that's laid out to
Yeah. It's so it's,
show show what to do?
yeah, it sounds like
what
on
you're
the
going to do, maybe,
on the redevelopment,
On the redevelopment.
yeah, the existing ordinance is probably intended to apply to the redevelopment parcels then. So you show what you have, existing conditions, and that you're not getting any more non-conforming, and you're good to go. Would not apply to brand-new construction, which says you have to meet these minimum standards.
Right. Yeah, a brand-new lot. Or a newly subdivided lot from a bigger lot or something.
It sounds like there's agreement there.
We've got a couple of people in the audience who might be able to share something on this.
Yeah, I think that's true. Randy, would you like to come up and speak? No, we'd be happy to have your input.
You got to have the mic.
Microphone.
Your friend the mic.
No.
How's that?
Oh, there you go.
And you can take it out and walk.
Thank you.
In case you want to leave.
Yeah, so as Shauna said, if you're not dealing with this all the time, it's a little, it can be a little
Intimidating.
confusing. Yeah, you know, you can. And we deal with it, and I still get confused with it. I'm not going to offer any suggestions to the legalities of how the ordinances are written or anything like that, obviously. But I can attest to how it's been treated because I've been involved in it since the start. I was involved in it when the state came up with it in 2008. They invited all the consultants to Concord, and they said, we're going to start enforcing this stuff, and here's how it's going to be. But the general thought is, we just want people to make it a little bit better. Given the fact that, you know, probably high 80, 90% are already developed, that really have the lots that aren't developed. We have a few. That's part of the confusion. And then the towns adopted it. Wolfeboro was one of them. The state had some issues with it, height restrictions, and some of the stuff wasn't, they couldn't enforce legally, this and that. 2012, they amended a lot of it. And the town of Wolfeboro, I was on the Conservation Commission at the time, held a joint meeting and said, you know, we think it's watered down, we want to have our own ordinance. So that's kind of how it all started, and I was around then. And I'll be completely honest with you, when Rob started doing it, and the first people that were doing it, there was a little confusion. It was the same application, and it basically was the same ordinance, the way it's read at the beginning, because I provided you with copies I had in my file. So how it was decided at the time was that the only lots that had to revegetate the point score or revegetate the unaltered to the standard were either lots that were over 20% post-proposed coverage or lots that weren't under redevelopment whether a small lot or a big lot. And by the way, the state had the small lot and the big lot from 2008 to 2012. They stopped it and just went to 25% because they had a lot of issues with that. Actually, I think the big lot isn't a bad idea when you're in a lot of situations, because if you're in a lot that hasn't been developed yet, then there's a good chance you can meet it, you know? So, but the 20% is a hard and fast rule. If you're, and it says exceeds 20%. So unless you exceed 20%, you do not have to upgrade the point score along the 50-foot waterfoot buffer. Originally, they had 50-foot grids, so they were 50 points. So don't be confused by that. And then along the way, the state switched it to 25 because people were cheating on the 50s. You know how they could like move them around? And so they went to 25s, and Wolfeboro adopted the 25, so that's what they have. So if you've got a 50-foot by 25-foot rectangle along the shore, north to south, and if you have a portion of one, then you do the ratio, and you have to have 25 points in there. There was a lot of discussion with Matt and Tavis and different times if we had to show the buffers at all. Because a lot of times with the state, if we're not doing anything in the 50, we don't have to show them, you know, so, but in Wolfeboro's case, we show them so that you can see that we're not going to do less or what's there. The unaltered area is something that, in one of the examples I sent to you, they didn't meet the unaltered area, and they were doing a redevelopment project. But because of the way the house was shaped and the lot was shifted, they had to get into that unaltered area on one side. They had to revegetate that in a different spot on the lot in the 100-foot band, 50 to 150, in order to be approvable. So that happens quite often, depending on the situation. I think you guys understand that the 50-foot band is normally where everything takes place. So usually it's the driveway, you know, the house, the garage. So in that area, if you actually have a very small lot, like on Russ Pond or somewhere, the 50 to 150 is such a small percentage that you can, most of the time, meet the unaltered. Because the area that you're dealing with is so small, if you just have some trees along your property line, you can almost meet it. And so the point has been, and Sean is exactly correct that they don't match up. I think it could be better. They've been used with that theory all along, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's all I can tell you guys, okay? And the theory has been to try to get people in a redevelopment situation to make it nearly more conforming by either the structure part, square footage, stormwater management features, you know, impervious pavement or whatever other stormwater management features. You are making that site more nearly conforming to the ordinance, because the whole point is to infiltrate stormwater. And you know, the state, you know, dug that into us right from the start. You know, that's the whole point. Don't get overcomplicated with some of the stuff. And the problem is that when you're reading ordinances that are in the zoning, and you know, the wording is a certain way, and the only waiver to that is Board of Appeals relief and basically hardship type stuff, I don't necessarily, excuse me, I don't think it's the right forum. So, see if I can get my voice back. I think that I had something for just in case.
You want to take a break to go to the water fountain, you're welcome to.
Let's see if I can do it. Yeah. So I think that is the way that everybody has proceeded so far. People have spent time and money based on the way it's always been done. How you guys handle it, it's totally up to you. Again, selfishly, from my perspective, I kind of told people, okay, this is the way it's usually been done. Not that that's a determining factor by no means, but you guys had asked for some examples, so I wanted to give you some. There's obviously a bunch more, and they're all a little bit different. But if you look at, if you don't mind passing some of these out, and you can keep them. There was something that one of the guys in the office developed that worked for me that had a hard time understanding this as well. And it just shows a little bit of an example of what the things Shauna was talking about, where they sit on the ground on a shorefront lot. It also has circles and squares relating to your application, so you can see right where that fits in. And all the text on the side just explains what that is. I may not have had enough, I'm sorry. So this is what you pose with if you get a project, whether it's a rare undeveloped lot or whether it's a normal lot redevelopment situation. It's where you start. And back in the day, Rob wanted to see state approval before he'd look at the town ones. Matt kind of went with the same route because he was just too busy, and I think that was the cop-out. But
It's not allowed anymore under state law.
well, yeah, right. And so by the time late in Matt's tenure and into Tavis's, I and other consultants kind of convinced him, hey, could you please look at the town one because it's a little more restrictive before we send it to the state. The state fees there's no town fee, and the state fees are pretty exorbitant right now. And so that was done lately, I think including with you, John, right?
Yeah, I mean, state law says that a municipal board can't hold up permits for lack of state permits, so we have to at this point.
Right. So we've been trying to take this, match it to the local rules, and submit it to the town most oftentimes before we go to the state, unless we think it's a real no-brainer with the state, and then we'll do it ahead of time. So generally, you can see the areas, and she picked out the areas that we're talking about. The waterfront buffer, 0 to 50. The unaltered area, well, first the 0 to 250, that's where you figure your overall percentage. Okay, so that's where you get the 20%, 30%, whatever you're dealing with. Then to figure your small and big lot, you go from 0 to 150. If you're under a half an acre, 21,780, then you're a small lot, and you're in the 25%. If you're over that, then you're in the 50. But that just means that's what you're in if you don't have already have a situation. You know what I mean? So if you had a virgin lot and you wanted to be over 20%, then you're going to have to do the point scores, and you're going to have to keep your percentage up to whatever size lot you are. In a lot reconstruction, the theory has been all along that you got a certain situation and you got to identify it, where you're at, and then if you can come down on your impervious areas by doing whatever features there are, and you don't make your point scores or your unaltered areas any more non-conforming, then that was an improvable situation. Now, what happened a while after that was everybody was doing that, so they were all getting 19%, 18%, 19.5%. And the planner was like, hey, what's going on? And I said, well, they're doing it on purpose. That way they don't have to, they have a house and they're not going to plant trees in front of that existing camp that's already encroaching on the 50. They can't do it, so they got to bring down the impervious, which is what the point is. That's kind of what you want them to do. And so Matt went to a seminar and heard a lot of stormwater management talk, and then the most substantive change in the ordinance was adding the 15 to 20% one stormwater management feature, because there were a lot of people that were over the 50, between 15 and 20, and there wasn't anything being done, necessarily extra. That didn't mean that they were doing anything more non-conforming, but they weren't doing anything extra, and I think it was the board's take at the time that, yeah, at least we'll get them to do something extra. So to me, other than the interpretation of the ordinance in the application, that was the most of a change that we had to pay attention to. How that relates to what the state does now, the original template that is still there, that original template was taken from the 2008 state template. The small lot, big lot, that's where that comes from. And so the town decided to keep that, and they've been dealing with it for the last 13 years that way. But as you guys can understand, if you see it, that area, that 50-foot, 100-foot band from 50 to 150 is the area of concern. And that's the area, existing versus proposed, that you have to pay the most attention to. And so, other than regular setbacks and expansion, non-conforming structures and that type of thing, that's how the shoreline permit process in Wolfeboro, in my humble opinion, has been dealt with. And so that was the whole point coming to you guys a month or two ago, and that was the whole, and Shanna and I have had conversations about it on different projects. And that was the reason for sending those things out. I know there was a lot of info in them, but once you understand the concepts, you can kind of follow it along. So it's up to you guys to decide which way to turn on it. Hopefully it ain't having to wait for town meeting, because there's a lot of people in the throes of this, but that's my take on it.
Well, is it do you agree that, we've got an application here, it has it's got an existing building conforming, there's no change in the lot coverage. As I read the ordinance, that means that they don't have to do a stormwater management plan, but they have to, if they don't meet, it's over 20%, they have to plant trees in the buffer if they don't have them, and they also have to meet the requirements for unaltered space area.
If they're over 20%, then they definitely have to do the grids. That the unaltered has been not dealt with that way. The unaltered is what it is. That's why the application is set up that way. And as long as you don't do less than that, you're inapprovable. And the reason for that is what I was just saying, is that development band, very rarely can you get 50% or 25% in that band. And again, that's one of the reasons for not throwing it in front of the ZBA, because what's the hardship to that, really, by sitting on the ZBA? Just do it smaller, right? And so to answer your question, Roger, I think that whether it says it succinctly in the rules and it matches, that's the way it's been treated in the past. And you can look at all three of those examples and see that.
And in my recollection is it's been treated in that way if you have, let's say, 4,000 unaltered existing. Now you want to put a corner of your garage in that unaltered area. That's when you have to replace that area that you're subtracting.
Right.
Unaltered area somewhere in the 150 to 50 zone,
So,
if you're going to go into it further.
Yeah, so that's the reason for that, because that's already there. That's why I said there is a difference, and she pointed it out, between lots that are undeveloped and lots that are reconstruction. There's a difference. There was a difference right from the start, and there was supposed to be a difference in how you dealt with them.
Can I jump in real quick? Because I feel like we're melding a lot of things together. So to answer your question, Roger, yes, it's very clear that lots over 20% need to do the grid. That's very clear. What is also in here, though, is that, and I'll read directly from the ordinance, within 50 feet from the reference line, a waterfront buffer must be maintained and then it goes on to talk about the grid section, without any reference to the 20%, which makes it sound like every lot needs to meet that. So that's in C2. On page 5, that's the grid replanting. The unaltered state is a whole different section of the ordinance, which is what Vaughn was referring to, which has to do with the size of the lot, that band. And the question there is about whether or not the renewal standards apply there, different than the grid.
But if you go back to
The grid?
section 1 under C, if you're over 20%, then you do have to make the grid with the waterfront buffer comply.
Absolutely. And then if you go to page 5, section C2, which applies to all lots, within the 50-foot from the reference line, a waterfront buffer must be maintained. Within that buffer, tree cover is managed with 25 by 50-foot grids, blah, 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 which makes it sound like that applies to every lot, not just lots over 20%. There's no reference to percentage of impervious cover in this entire section C.
So see, if the percentages didn't count, then what's the point?
And I'm not advocating for one side or the other. If we wanted the way that Randy, the way that it's been interpreted, it just means we need to change the ordinance, because the ordinance doesn't read that way.
Well, I disagree, but I think if you look at C2, it says a waterfront buffer must be maintained. It doesn't say it needs to be upgraded.
Yeah,
Or established.
yeah, maintained.
Right, that's right.
And there is also a caveat to that. If you have areas incapable of supporting trees, such as areas of rock, ledge, beaches, we even talked about boathouses, or a smaller segment, you proportionately reduce the points needed.
Yes.
And that's happened before, and you
Yeah.
had to get an arborist to prove that you couldn't plant underneath, a high overstory or something like that. But it was that you couldn't make it worse.
Right, and that's in section 5 on the next page, yep.
And even though it's not written, I would think that areas like rock outcroppings, ledge, beaches, even structures couldn't be included in the overall unaltered area that needs then to be 25 or 50% left, because, the consistency would be if you've got that, you can't
Yeah.
plant in it.
Well, one thing I'd like to point out is, if you look at the large lot, it changed slightly in the new ordinance, because if you look at the older ones, it said exclusive of post-construction impervious. Now it says inclusive of impervious. Which one?
Right.
You know,
It would
so,
apply pre, yep.
but if you think about, and I dealt with this up on River Street, if you think of the band between 50 and 150 that you see on here, and then you figure in your unaltered, and you've got your proposed plan, which is your house and your driveway and your garage, you get to subtract all that area according to the ordinance, and whatever's left, you only got to do 50% of that.
Correct.
It's not
That's how
real
it's written.
sensical, but we've used it before. That's why the state went to just one, quite frankly. The state said, yeah, no, we're going to go with 25%. But even the state with 25%, no matter how big your lot is, they don't make you revegetate unless you get over the percentage. Their intent is to make it better somehow. And that's, if you talk to them, that's what they'll preach.
So,
How you guys come up with it?
So, go ahead.
so if you look at this proposal that you handed out, all that they're doing is removing an old bad septic system that's too close to the lake and pushing it back into a wooded area on the lot beyond 150 feet. So nothing really gets affected, but unfortunately now they've got to plant 2 trees in grid C.
Right, and
You
so,
know,
right, and so
They're
what I,
doing something really good here. It wouldn't seem like we should have to penalize them, because the only thing they're doing is replacing the septic system.
yeah, I mean, the way I looked at it, it wasn't a penalty, right, to them. It was bringing the lot up to the standard that we were looking for, which was that 25% unaltered state standard. And so, yes, I reached out to them and I said, you are not meeting the renewal standards, which say that you need to bring it up to that 25%. And so they had to plant some more area.
In the 50-foot section.
In the 50 to 150
Yeah.
is the renewal standards. They may also have had, I think they were taking some trees down on the water, and
Okay.
so they replanted trees in
Okay.
order to keep their grid section equal.
Yeah, the DES, if you're, if you're reconstructing a failed system, as long as the loading doesn't go up, you don't have to get a shoreline permit.
And
Yeah.
that's lovely, but it is nowhere in the local.
No, it's nowhere
right?
in the
So-
local rules. No, I'm just saying, that's what they do on it, yeah.
People do come all the time and say, well, DES says this, and DES says I can do that, and there's nothing I can do about that because it's not cited in the local. I do want to get back to the lot redevelopment, because I do want to point out, I think that is key to the direction of interpreting this whole ordinance. I do want to point out that narrative letter, section D, a narrative letter is required explaining how the project is more nearly conforming, and it cites subsections D1A through C above. So right exactly above that is it saying more non-conforming with the footprint, impervious area, location, like the items that are required on the plan. What we would need to do is say that narrative letter needs to explain how they are more in compliance with A, B, and C above, not section D, not compliant with the lot redevelopment ordinance, but compliant with that in A, B, and C, the impervious lot coverage, the natural woodlands buffer, and the 50-foot setback. And by citing those sections and saying that's all that you need to be more compliant in to be called lot redevelopment, therefore you are only subject to the lot redevelopment portion of this ordinance, which is section D.
Well, I'd like to
But
speak
D
to-
can also be read, though, as saying that it's with reference to the information, more nearly conforming than the existing structures, as that phrase is defined below, which is in 2, and then with reference to the information required. So that I think can be read as saying you have the information A, B, and C needs to establish that it is more nearly conforming.
If I might, one of the more nearly conforming items is moving the existing structures back to compliance or near compliance. You're still grandfathered in the footprint, so a lot of times more nearly conforming is moving the camps that are 20 feet from the lake back behind the 50 and then just allowing the decks or porches a little bit in the 50. And again, not to reference DES, but that's what they consider nearly more conforming. And that's part of it. And the other part of it is whatever stormwater management features you are implementing that you don't have now. And a combination of those things were what was looked at, was what determined. It's not easily determined because they're all a little bit different. But that was the mindset.
So a question for the board, I guess, is we know the application doesn't follow the ordinance. It sounds like we want to update the application to follow the ordinance, but in the short term, but it sounds like we also want to make some updates to the ordinance so that it's very clear to future people in the planning office, which will be everybody in the planning office moving forward, right? Exactly how to apply this ordinance. And so I can bring to you, maybe not at the next meeting because it's only 2 weeks, but the next work session meeting, drafts of both of those that we can then move forward with, if that's helpful, that we can take a look at.
I would have concerns about making any changes to the regulations at this point.
Didn't we have a whole committee that did this?
We did.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I
Like
was
a rather
on the
large
committee with Rob Hausman.
I was on the committee with Rob, and then I was on with Paul Montrone.
Yeah, Sam.
Yeah.
And Kathy, I think, was on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think I would also be
John was on
reluctant to
too.
change the ordinance, but I don't see any harm in having us consider whatever Ms. Saunders might want to propose for it.
Yeah.
But I
cer-
think,
oh,
I
well,
think
go ahead.
tomorrow, the application can change, though. I mean, that's just bookkeeping. There's
Well,
no
there-
issue there.
There's very little staff in the office tomorrow.
But you know what I mean? There's nothing stopping.
I'm not
the
back in until
typos or
Thursday.
Cross it out with a pen and say, oh, I'm sorry, we updated the words, you know? I mean, that's just office work. They
Yeah,
can change at any moment to say, oop, we got a new one because we found some typos.
Julie, I agree with you, although I think that given the concerns we've discussed tonight, it would be useful to have the board review whatever revised application is developed so we agree that it meets our intent.
Agreed, yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I have a question for Randy, if you don't mind. You have a checklist here, which is a master checklist where you check off, the plans and the scale and da, da, da. Do you have your own internal checklist that you use depending on where you're going in the ordinance?
I'd like to say we are that organized, and we do have a checklist. The trouble with them being all a little bit different,
Because they're all a little different.
can throw a tangent into that, but general things, yes. General items need to be checked off to see if we've looked at them.
Well, then this is almost it.
Well,
Yeah,
that's what I'm.
That's why we developed that. My question would be, I guess, to all of you, to Shawna, can you change the application in the interim without changing the ordinance at like town meeting or something?
I believe we can.
We can do whatever we want with the
Actually-
application.
We changed the ordinance and we failed to change the application.
Right, so the
we're
application
just
is-
way
Can
delayed.
be in turn.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I
I mean,
think it would be good
could you
for,
color code that to say if you're doing section B, go to the blues?
Yeah, and like I say, one of my guys did that for me today. And I said, we're going to want to keep that because that's a good thing to use, you know? And it was because, Shauna mentioned being a newbie, and I said that at the beginning of my blabbering. There's a lot to it. It wasn't set up to be really technical and engineering-wise and, zoning board-wise. It was set up to just do a little better. But anytime you do this stuff, this is what ends up happening. And because they're all different, every one you get can go in a different direction. And then they add the subjective part to the application and the ordinance about nearly more conforming. And I'm here to tell you, Rob's wrestled with it, Matt wrestled with it, and so did Tavis, but generally, that's why I picked all three. That's the same template. Whether you guys want to stick to that template or not, and it's going to be things like Shauna just mentioned, you can't go over 30%. Okay, let's say you go to a site and it's 34%. Starting out. And the house is right next to the water and there's patios and there's no way to do that. Is that a hardship situation? Not really, just don't do what you're asking for, But if you can reduce, if you can put pervious paving in, or you can put a rain garden in, or you can do some sort of things other than moving the house back in the situation, because you want to put a little garage up by the road or whatever, and get that below, and not only get it below 30%, but maybe get it below 20% so that you don't fall under having to replant the grids per the ordinance language. Or bring your unaltered that's already your yard up to the 25 or 50 foot standard. I think that that's what you guys intended, and like the last time I talked to you, there was a couple of comments from Steve or Brad where I said, good, you know, we think it's a good ordinance after we redlined it all up. We think people can still do stuff, but it'll be better and maybe a little smaller. And that was the comments.
Yep.
And I think you can still do that with what you got. Is the application perfect? No, it never has been. You know, and that's why it gets interpreted differently.
And I think we really ought to figure out what is the criteria that does send it to the zoning board? And why can't the planner, current, future, ongoing, make a decision based on this criteria and say it's better?
Because they have to deal with it too.
Yeah, but to send it to the zoning board for hardship, that's a hardship. This is a hardship. Maybe they could write that down.
Good. I appreciate the input. I appreciate your patience with me as I work through both the application and the ordinance with you, and we'll definitely get you some amendments.
So can we assume that we'll have something to review at the April 15th meeting?
I think so.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments from anybody? No, all right, thank you. And Randy, thank you for your input as well.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is preliminary consultation for David B. Kiko and Beth Tomasello and Philip Quartarano, revocable trust, a boundary line adjustment at 38 Island Road, tax map 222-3 and 235-5. And I assume, Randy, that you're up for that one as well.
Oh, one in front of me.
My stuff is organized.
You can replace the plans we have with these.
Good, because I can't find them.
Color now. Use those plans.
Thank you.
All set?
All right, Randy, go ahead.
Thank you. Randy Tatro, land surveyor for Norway Plains, for the applicant. This is a minor lot line adjustment between two existing parcels. To give a location, it's down off of Pleasant Valley Road on a private road. There used to be, well, you guys would know better, it used to be a camp, boys camp or whatever down there. Girls camp?
Yeah, Pleasant Valley Camp.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
YMCA Camp.
Yeah, so that gentleman passed away over the last year. The guy who bought that property, owned that property, Mr. Cartatero, and his family now owns it. Our client, David Keto and Beth Tomasello, own the camp lot that I've got highlighted in yellow. Existing camp lot on Lake Wentworth. They were having septic system issues, and they hired Mr. Cooper Dock to do a new septic system on a failed system that was located on their lot. This kind of shows you the general area of where it sits, from Pleasant Valley Road all the way down to Lake Wentworth. And then this is just a blow up of the area that we're dealing with. So basically, they were in a situation where they needed to put the septic system in, and they needed to relocate it further back. So they got an agreement with the heirs of Mr. Cordero and had us do a easement plan. There's a recorded easement plan first, so they could construct the leach field where they did. It's all approved and installed. They needed the extra land. They needed the actual spot for the septic system, and they needed the extra land area for lot loading, because it's a 5-bedroom septic, a 5-bedroom camp. So, and again, that was performed by Mr. Cooperdock. It's all state approved. We have the numbers on the plan. After that, that was the imperative panic part of it, and that was done last year. And now they have come to an agreement with the family to purchase the land in fee. So they actually own the land the septic system is under. And again, that's basically what we're showing here. I believe it brings a lot into conformity. Does it bring it over an acre? And the remaining land is a large lot. The old camp buildings still in existence, and I believe White Mountain Horizons did a shoreline septic design thing for them not that long ago, and we show those on the overall. Kind of where that sits. So the small lot would be brought to conformity, and frontage and access remains the same. It's a private road. I don't know, I believe we're going to ask for waivers, Leanne, to site features on both lots, because there's a septic design topography plan already on file at the town for the Keto lot, and there's also one on file for the big lot, which obviously is big anyway, and there's an old existing survey by Mr. Claflin back in the 40s of the whole camp property. So there was no need to do, any full survey of that lot. So the areas that we show on there, based on that. The small stuff was all surveyed, and it's based on survey measurements, and the other one's based on the deed existing reference plan areas and the tax map. Any questions?
So you will be placing 2 new monuments?
Yep.
Yep.
In fact, we had to set easement corners anyway, Bon, so we're probably just going to change the caps. Luckily. But yeah, like I say, the easement part of that was, kind of a rush, because they really were in a bind with the septic problems. So that's why it was done that way before the lot line adjustment. And they had to come, and because the butter passed away, and there was probate and different stuff going on. So we finally got the work done and got before you guys so that they can actually purchase it.
And you'll put the current and proposed acreage on the plan?
I don't have that?
No? You've got the 0.50 acres, but you don't have the shorefront lot.
Is it in this box up here?
Extra .05.
This
Area.
footage.
Yeah.
It is in that box.
1.24.
Okay.
It's just tiny.
That's the trouble with a small place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that, I tried to make it more evident this time because sometimes before we'll put it in different places and we've been questioned on it. So I tried to put a box around it this time and put it in there. And hopefully that says what you're asking, Roger.
It's on the overall plan here.
Yeah.
And it also gives the form factors, because Kathy's not here to ask for that. I think they're on there too. Pretty easy on this one.
A rectangle works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rectangle.
Yeah. The perfect rectangle is 16, and yeah. So, but the big lot is a little bit odd shaped. And again, I believe that was based on the available information. So I think that's it.
All right, any other comments or questions from the board?
Oh, we've been to the TRC, by the way.
Yes.
Ah.
Already, okay.
Very good. Been to TRC, very good. All right, Randy, thank you. I think
Thank
that's
you.
it. Next item on the agenda is the discussion items. First item is appointment of chair and vice chair. We don't have anybody yet from the Board of Selectmen as a representative. We'll see who joins us. Would anybody like to make a nomination for chair or vice chair?
I nominate Doug Breskin for chairman.
I second.
All right, I'll accept the nomination. Anyone else?
I would like to nominate Steve Webster for vice chair.
I'll second that.
Yes.
All right, is that a motion, Vaughn?
Yeah, that's sorry, that was a motion, yes.
Very good.
I'll accept that.
Steve will also accept. All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
That's for both Steve and myself. All right, next is appointment of planning board alternate positions. Both Kathy Barnard, who has long served on this board, and Jane Nielsen have expressed interest in remaining or renewing their alternate positions. So I'll make a motion to have Kathy Barnard and Jane Nielsen appointed as planning board alternates.
Second,
Second, yep.
We have a second from Roger.
Aye.
And these are both for 3-year terms. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. The next item is Planning Board Representative appointments to the Technical Review Committee. I know that both Steve and Kathy have been doing that work already. So I would make a motion to appoint both Steve, well, Steve would be the Planning Board Representative, and Kathy can attend as the alternate. Can I have a second?
She can attend as an alternate? Yes?
Well, they're open to the public, so certainly.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
making sure that just made the second planning board member, that's all I was making sure. Yes, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Very good. The next item is Planning Board Representative appointments to the Capital Improvement Plan Committee.
Isn't that what we just did?
No, that was the TRC. But
No.
we just did TRC. Next one is CIP. So the board has to appoint 2 members, including member or alternates of the planning board, to the CIP committee. One is appointed as chair of the committee, and the rules of procedure state that the chairperson of the Capital Improvements Program Committee shall be the chairperson of the planning board. Unfortunately, I am not able to attend those meetings on a regular basis. And I believe, as Leanne has mentioned, we may need to change our rules of procedure to allow somebody other than the chairperson to chair the Capital Improvements Plan Committee.
how do we amend the CIP rules of procedure? How do we amend the CIP procedure rules?
Just like you do the planning board, just like you do the planning board rules of procedure.
Okay.
In a meeting, and then you hold a public hearing, and you,
So I guess as a matter of order, do we need to then change the rules of procedure before we appoint somebody other than chair as,
well, you appointed someone other than chair last year,
yes.
and due to your inability to serve.
I understand the practical aspects of it, certainly. I just want to conform to the rules. So for expediency, I would move to appoint Steve Webster as member and chair of the 2025 CIP committee and Kathy Barnard as a member.
Second,
Second.
All right? All in favor?
Aye.
I'll accept that.
we didn't give you a chance.
So can I make a motion to adjust the rules of procedure so that we can bring it right to public hearing?
I think so.
We don't need a public hearing, do we? We just have to announce the change, and
You have to bring the planning board rules of procedure to public hearing prior to adoption.
do we, or can we just adopt them?
Oh, it's not that hard to just bring them to public.
I'm just going to bring it to a work session, and we'll
Yeah.
do it then.
Yeah.
Not expedite it. CIP is not beginning for another several months, so we have time.
Thank you.
So my motion is to amend the rules of procedure to allow someone other than the chairman to be the chairman.
To be clear, it's to amend the CIP rules of
Rules of-
procedure.
Yes.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, very good. Thank you. The next item is citizen appointments to the CIP committee. Paul Whalen, Tim Cronin, Chuck Sumner, and Suzanne Ryan were appointed to the CIP last year and some prior years. And Paul, Tim, and Chuck have each requested to continue serving for the coming year. So I would make a motion to nominate Paul Whalen, Tim Cronin, and Chuck Sumner to the committee, to the CIP committee.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Suzanne is on the Budget Committee, and it's likely that she will be the Budget Committee's representative to the CIP, I believe. Okay. Well, we'll see.
So
There's
does that leave
opportunity.
an opening?
Yes, I'm sorry?
Does that leave openings?
Yes,
Yeah,
if you look at my memo,
I just wanted him to say it out loud so people could hear it.
yes, so certainly if any member of the public is interested in serving on the CIP committee, please let us know and express your interest.
So there's a question to the board that, given that Suzanne Ryan is now a member of the Budget Committee and could be appointed as Budget Committee representative, would the board like to advertise for a member-at-large citizen appointment to the CIP committee?
I think that would be useful.
So we advertise.
Yeah,
Like in the paper, you're saying that kind of advertise?
yes. To publicly post a request.
Facebook too.
Yeah. Do we need a motion to do that? All right. All right. So there's the decision. Please do post it.
Advertise.
The next item on the agenda is review of the 2025 work program.
Before we do that, can I just, while we're appointing people to things, once more remind the planning board that we only have one representative to the Lakes Region Planning Commission, which is me, and we're entitled to two. And it would be nice if we could have our two representatives appointed.
Would anybody like to volunteer?
That's the problem.
It does not have to be, though, a planning board member. Is that right, Roger?
Correct.
So perhaps that's something we could also advertise if there's somebody in the community that's interested in serving in that position. Yes, certainly
Yeah,
if
that would be a possibility.
if we are able to fill that position, that would be a good person to have.
Yep.
I know that there are some interviews ongoing with potential planners, so perhaps in a couple of weeks' time, we might have somebody identified. Leanne was kind enough to provide us with a memo of the work program. We can certainly go down and see if there's anything we want to add, and if you want to prioritize any of it, and perhaps assign dates to some of them if you think that they need to be addressed in a timely fashion.
I would suggest that at the last meeting, a member of the public ended up talking about an ordinance associated with ridgeline development, and that is in fact part of the recommendations from the natural resources part of the master plan. So I would like to get that onto the list of things that we should talk about.
Yes, that's included on this list of work items already.
Where?
Do you want to move it up?
It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th item down, ridgeline setback.
Ah,
And
You
I
maybe
know
wanna
a
move
bunch
it
of
up?
work has been done. I don't know if we've drafted
I read
proposed-
down this list so many
Yeah.
times and I
I
couldn't.
think it needs to be maybe broader, you know.
I might have it, I'll look for it. We worked on this before.
Yeah, and can it maybe include
Kathy.
like, you know,
Kathy's done some work on
logging and
it.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's not listening to you.
I'm sorry?
She's just not listening.
No, but she's got her cheerleader behind her.
Yeah, yeah. But can we keep in our minds that maybe we want to make sure it includes logging permits and that sort of stuff? Because that's how I lost mine by my house not too long ago, under a logging permit.
You're talking about it specifically in relation to the ridgeline?
Ridgeline, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So certainly that
So
can be considered.
added to the ridgeline language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. And I understand that the argument would have gone, well, we only took the pines, we left the oaks. Yeah, so now the ridgeline is half as tall as it used to be. Mm-hmm. It's not quite the same.
And it looks different in winter.
It looked really different just as soon as fall came by, and I noticed it. Mm-hmm. Do we need to move around any of these other things, or are we just going to pick at them as we want them to come up?
No, I think that we do need to put them in some order, not necessarily that the order they're presented on this memorandum.
Can I add something?
Certainly.
So for April 15th, I would like to get the CIP rules of procedure and the planning board rules of procedure on the agenda, and hopefully take care of that, and, or at least get them started. I do know that we have to schedule a public hearing for the planning board,
Sure.
one, so we'll at least get the change before the board on the 15th, and then maybe we can adopt it at the next month. And then Shanna will also come before the board on April 15th with the shoreline permit application revisions proposal, as discussed this evening. And then Steve Randall would like to come before the board and present the road construction regulations that he has.
That's all on the 15th of April? Okay. That'll be plenty for one night, I think.
Yes, so I'm kicking off your 2025.
Thank you.
And does he also want to address the water and sewer hookup?
No, he does not.
Okay.
He would like, he has requested, he wants that addressed by the planning board, but he has asked, well, not asked, he's recommending that council, planning board council, submit language.
Excuse me. I think the answer is pretty straightforward. And when I was looking at that, basically it says that it's required in the village residential, I think the residential, so it's 175-73 and 175-83. And I think if you just put after in the residential, it's water, in the village residential, it's water and sewer. And I think if you just say, unless the Director of Public Works certifies that this town does not have the capacity to provide the service, and whatever magic language he thinks would fit that.
Correct, he said at the discretion of.
I'm not in favor of
Well,
it.
not at the discretion, well, that's what he's saying. He would like planning board council to put forth the language, but he feels that it should be, if the state's telling the town that it doesn't go there, then that's what should
Yeah,
happen.
I think it should be, I don't think it should be in the Public Works Director's discretion. I think if he certifies that the town can't provide water and sewer, then that's the point.
Yeah, but it wasn't him, it was the state.
So he's not making a recommendation,
Well-
he's just laying out what it is or isn't, right?
Well, whoever it is going to certify that we can't provide the water, and I think that addresses it. So you don't have,
It's not discretion, it's a black and white decision.
Right,
yes.
Black and white decision.
either can or he can't. Yeah.
And then he just said to have it, right, and he just asked if the council would just. provide
Sure.
the language,
Yeah,
the legal language.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I'm not sure it's legal language. I think it's more Public Works or DES language.
Well, no, I think what Leanne's saying is that the planning board council would propose language to include in the ordinance.
The ordinance.
Yes, just like every other one that we do.
Yeah,
We run it by them, yeah.
but we have to have language in the ordinance.
That's April.
But the water and sewer hookup is not going to be April 15th, is that right?
No.
No, okay,
Just, he wants to, no,
okay.
he wants to present what he has for the road construction regulations, because they are not the ones that you had before you last June, I believe is the
Yeah.
last iteration you had. for
We didn't
that.
finish.
It is not what you had. So he wants to make sure you have the correct regulations in front of you, and then he wants to go through them,
All right, so,
make a decision where you guys are going from there.
yeah, any of the work items, other than the ones that we're going to do April 15th, they're going to be in the work session in May or later, which is a couple of months from now, and I'm optimistic that we will have a town planner by then, so perhaps we can work with that planner to help set the schedule on the rest of the work items, the work program items.
Can I suggest that maybe we get the vending one as close to the top as we can?
I'm sorry?
May I suggest that we do the vending one as close to the top as possible, since it's 60 degrees outside and they're going to be popping up all over?
Sure.
Even though I'd like to see some of the other ones maybe in front of it, but I think that one's probably one of the more important ones all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So not next week, but the week after.
That's fine. You mean not next week, but next meeting? Yeah, yeah. Although it's my assumption that whatever we do on vending carts will have to go to a warrant article. So
Yep.
it's certainly a year
But
away.
at least if we talk about it and then get the public, thing involved and all that stuff, we'll have done our due diligence. We've
Yes,
done our
yes.
work.
And to your point with the weather warming up, it'll be in the public's mind. Anybody have any further comments on the work program?
I'll offer a comment on the impact fee ordinance. That is that probably second default budget year in a row is not a good time to hire someone to spend town money evaluating our impact fee ordinance.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Roger.
But did we even find somebody that's doing them after we got blown off last time because the guy retired? Did we ever find out if there's a company that's doing this?
I don't know. But to Roger's point, I think that's moot at the moment. So that may be a work session item that gets put off for a year, and hopefully we won't be in a default budget next year. So the next item on the agenda is under other business, we have a letter that we've been asked to support the proposed 30 affordable housing units at Harriman Hill 3 in Wolfeboro. This is a letter ostensibly to Katie Esterly Marley, who's the executive director at the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. And I'll read the text of the letter with the hope that we as a board will then support it. It reads, this letter is in support of the proposed 30 affordable housing units at Harriman Hill 3 in Wolfeboro as part of the Lakes Region Community Developers Tax Credit Application. This project will serve individuals and families with incomes ranging from 30% to 120% of the area median income, including 3 units designed for extremely low-income individuals with developmental disabilities. Additionally, 3 units will be offered at market rate. The development will include a mix of 8 one-bedroom units, 14 two-bedroom units, and 8 three-bedroom units. These will be townhouse-style buildings, with 6 units being ADA compliant. Also included in this project will be shared laundry facilities, a community room, a playground, a walking path, resident services, and on-site management. The Harriman Hill property is owned by Eastern Lakes Region Housing Coalition, who has developed phases 1 and 2, and now phase 3, along with the town of Wolfeboro, Northern Human Services, New Hampshire Housing, Evernorth, and the New Hampshire Community Development Authority and the Beck Fund. The Wolfeboro Planning and Development Department sees Harriman Hill 3 project as a way to meet the ever-increasing need for affordable housing in our area. The Zoning Board of Adjustment, the Planning Board, and community supporters all agreed when the project was approved in July of 2023. As our community ages and the demand for services increases, we are attempting to plan to make certain affordable housing as available for families and individuals who want to live and work in the Wolfeboro area. This is a critical need in Wolfeboro. Harriman Hill 1 and 2 have been very successful in helping meet the need for affordable housing, but the need is still there. These 30 affordable units will help us meet this important need. Thank you for your consideration of Lakes Region Community Developers Tax Credit application. So I'd like to make a motion that we as a board support this.
I second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Very good.
Sounds great.
The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes.
I have thought that the review of the master plan and its update and what's been done on it is in process. It probably won't be available for another little bit of time, but there has been some improvements. Some of the things that hadn't been done are now done, and so there's progress being made on the master plan.
Oh, thank you. Good to hear. The next item is approval of minutes. We're going to table the February 11th minutes because there's some issues in getting them correct. And we have the March 4th minutes. Would anybody have any corrections or changes for the March 4th minutes?
Yes. On the line 20, the first page, I think it should read a letter into the record, not into the letter, and thanking her for her dedication.
Yeah, I agree.
Line 27, my name is still Roger. I rendered legal services to the applicant, just to be specific. On line 35,
Roger, before you go forward on that one, on that same line, I suggest it should be, rather than excused himself, perhaps it should be recused.
Yes, please.
Yeah. On line 35, it should be code officer, not building inspector. And if I want to be picky, on line 40, it should be an ash gray color. And on page 2, I didn't sit on this application, but I think part of Steve's motion was that site review was not required.
What line number is that?
67.
What line number is that, 67?
67, yeah. Since that was the issue before the board.
Can we go to line number 78 and Steve Webster recused himself?
Yes, again, excused to recused on line 78.
And may I comment that I love the numbers and I love the paragraphs? It's great.
Do you want me to keep going?
I'm going up to number 163 unless you got one that's before then.
Where are you?
163, and I can't remember why, confirming that their comments can be addressed. Oh, the word "there" is incorrect. That's what it is. Confirming that their
It
comments
should
can
be
be addressed.
T-H-E-I-R
Yes.
instead of T-H-E-R-E.
I've got, going back to line 133 on page, which is page 3, it should be November 14th, and I believe it was 2023 that the Granite Seed Adaptive was originally approved. I think that's when it was. I didn't check it.
Yeah, I think it was 23. I remember we talked about that at the meeting.
And Julie, where was your change?
What?
163,
163, yeah. Number 163.
the third word,
Oh,
Confirming that their.
yeah.
T-H-E-I-R instead of T-H-E-R-E.
And somewhere, I think, at the top of page 4, we should put in that my suggestion would be on line 145 that they, on the revised plans, which he brought to the hearing, the revised plans dated March 4th, which he brought to the hearing, to get the fact that he was talking about March 4th plans.
So there are several references on that line to the plans, and you're suggesting it should read the March 4th plans.
Yeah.
Okay.
However we wanted to do that, but... and then on line 146, it was leaching, not leaching. It was Leaching.
Oh, yeah. You want to skip ahead to number 281, or have you got something before then?
No, I yield the floor.
281 is technically correct, but it's garbled, and it took me 10 minutes to figure out what it said. I think we just need to maybe spell out the word 8, and then say 12-inch diameter piers. Because anybody that had not a clue as to what the pictures looked like is not going to be able to figure out what that says. Because that looks like 112-inch piers. It's correct, but it's difficult.
We'll just make it 8 each.
And
Well, if-
12-inch diameter rather than just 12-inch.
12-inch diameter. Yes, because I couldn't figure out how we had 8 12-inch piers, but those 12-inch piers are 36 inches off the ground. Without a picture to go with it, it's a little difficult.
And if we're being picky, on line 287, there should be no apostrophe in Zimmerman's. And then on line 312, I believe that should be after Kathy's motion, so it should be about line 319. And line 327, it should read from the front property lines, because that was a setback being discussed.
You sure it wasn't all lines?
I don't think the setback would not be 50, it was that you have to be within 15 feet of the road, and so there are 2 front setbacks on Pine Street and Center Street. And that's the
Not the
one
other
where
two.
in C1, you gotta be within 15 feet.
Could you call it frontage property lines?
Street frontage, yeah. You could say that, yeah.
And that does it for me.
Any other changes or corrections? Would somebody like to make a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second this lovely set of minutes.
All right, all in favor?
As changed. Aye.
All right, I'll abstain as I was not present at the meeting.
I wasn't either.
So we've got
1,
4
2.
approved, 4 to approve, 2 abstain, and
I have to abstain, right?
Nancy will also abstain.
And Kathy can't say anything because she's in the audience.
Right, she hasn't been sworn in yet. All right, that takes care of the minutes. The next item is informational item, ZBA notice of decision. There are 2 ZBA notices of decision. They were both continued to April 7th meeting. I don't think any more needs to be said. And the last item is public comment, and we have Kathy Barnard.
Okay, all of our ordinances passed at the town meeting last week, and we really need some sort of a application developed for the short-term rental. And I think Roger and I would be happy to work on that.
Very good.
Are you suggesting a sort of a committee?
Oh, okay, all right. Because, I mean, we really need to get the word out to people that there is an application, they've got to comply and get moving.
Kathy, are you available to discuss that on Thursday at 1 p.m.?
Thursday, I think so, yeah.
All right, well, so there's going to be a meeting to look at that Thursday at 1 p.m. in the planning department.
Okay,
That's going to be the first hit at what we're going to do.
okay.
Thank you. All right. Anything else from anybody? Nancy, I hope we kept you entertained.
Yes, quite. Thank you.
Memorize that book by the next meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna
There'll be a quiz at the end.
read this tonight.
There are, if you go on the New Hampshire Municipal Association website, there are seminars and presentations and trainings that you can take to acquaint yourself specifically with land use boards, so I highly recommend those.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you were here before me. I assumed that you would know. All right, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.